Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Now today is the 5th of February and today I'm going to be doing a quick frontline update. I don't have enough time to go into too much detail. I'm just going to give a cursory view of what's been going on the front line over the past few days. Okay, first of all, Marinka, the Russians have been able to cross over Druzhby Avenue for really the first time, taking over this facility over here, this agricultural enterprise. And so you can see that they have partial control over it, although Ukraine does still have positions in the western parts of the facility, and this is where the 79th Air Assault Brigade is in their 2nd Battalion. So this is where the fighting is going on right now, and then the Russians are trying to advance towards Druzhby Avenue on a broader front, just all across Marinka. The thing is though, Druzhby Avenue isn't that significant in the grand scheme of things because it's just one more road. You could see there are plenty of other roads here with plenty of other residential buildings, and all of those need to be dislodged. The significance of taking over this facility, though, in the south is that it could open up a potential opportunity to flank the southern part of Marinka, but we're going to have to see if that happens. It might not be possible because of just how fortified the city is. But anyway, let's move on to the situation in Klischiivka and Ivanivske in that entire direction. So over here, the Wagner Group and the Russians in general have been able to expand their sphere of control, not only from the mine, but sort of expanding outwards. So now they're directly attacking the town of Stupochki. They're now taking over the high ground just to the east of the town because the town is located on relatively low elevation. So this area that I'm circling is on like a pretty high elevation in comparison, which makes it harder to hold on to the residential buildings at Stupochki. The Russians are fighting in the forested area. They're fighting in some of these mines, some of these quarries, some of these small ponds, taking them over one by one. And they are rapidly approaching, or they may already be at, the road that connects Ivanivske to Bakhmut. So this yellow road over here is the one I'm talking about. Ukraine isn't using it anyway, so it's not that big of a deal anymore. But it does mean that the Russians are inching closer to the last main supply line that leads to Bakhmut through Chasiv Yar, through Komarove into Bakhmut. So that's something to look into. At the same time, the Russians are advancing, specifically with their first echelon of Wagner reconnaissance units through these forests over here. They're attacking now the southwestern part of Ivanivske, and so the Ukrainians are trying to put up a defense over here. They were pushed back from their fortifications in these open fields and in these reservoirs that you could see over here, where they had some fortified positions. All of those were cleared, and now the Russians they have an opportunity to attack the southern part of the town, and so it could be enveloped from several sides. The only flank really where the Ukrainians really are on at least like equal footing or in a better position is over here on this, I guess you could say, a right flank from our perspective, because the forest that separates the Russian line of contact with the Ukrainian fortified positions is still not under Russian control, so the Russians need to clear this forest, and then after that they need to go through and clear out these agricultural enterprises. You have some fortified areas over here that Ukraine has turned into trenches. There's some hills over here that need to be taken over, some rural areas that have houses that could be used to defend. So Ukraine is currently fortifying this area in an effort to prevent the town of Ivanivske from being cut off from Bakhmut. So that's really the situation in the south. At the same time, the Russians are advancing from the southern parts of Bakhmut, really these orchards, these fields, the city of Opitny or the suburb of Opitny, towards the southern Bakhmut city. So they're attacking in the direction of the Mariupolske cemetery that actually took over a farming facility. They launched several attacks onto the southern district. I think it's called the Sobachivka district, and video footage shows that they were unsuccessful in breaking through the Ukrainian lines and entering the residential areas, but it does show that the line of contact is very close to the residential areas, which means that the front line has shifted to the north, which means that a lot of pressure is being applied by the Wagner Group as they're launching these preliminary assaults onto the city itself. We're also seeing that now it's been confirmed via footage that the Wagner Group has advanced into southern Bakhmut from their positions on Opitny. And so I'm not actually changing the front line because of this, because my front line was already indicative of this. But now we actually have video footage to show that the line of contact is around this general area, with the Russians trying to advance towards the Bakhmut dam, and they are pretty close at the moment, though the progress is very slow. No updates about the Bakhmutka area. The Ukrainians are holding out in a protracted resistance, but they did lose ground in the Miaskombinat district in the north. Now the meat processing plant is being flanked from all sides. So the Ukrainian troops that are fortified in this area, trying to prevent a Russian breakthrough into the processing plant. But all around them, the Ukrainians are retreating from the residential areas. The Russians were able to take over this local park, some of these restaurants in the area, an auto repair shop, and now they're pretty close to clearing up the entire district. So I think they really just have to reach this area over here, and then they'll just have to clear up this blue polygon, and then all of the district will be under their control. So once that happens, they can then attack the rest of the Bakhmutka district and the main road leading into western Bakhmut, where you have all these high-rise buildings that need to be Ukrainians need to be dislodged from if they want to clear out eastern Bakhmut. Now, if they don't want to do that, then they are in a pretty good position to attack the northern flanks as well, which is what we're seeing going on right now. So the Russians actually do have a bridgehead to the west of the Bakhmutovka River. They took over this garden center, and they took over some houses in the area that are just to the south of Klischiivka. And so using these positions, they're now beginning to attack the northern district of Bakhmut, the northernmost district. It's called the Stupki district. It's the one that I'm going to circle over here. Sorry, this one over here. This is the Stupki district. And so it really is just an extension of Klischiivka in a way, and it just links up that town with Bakhmut. And so now the fighting is going on very close to that district, with the Wagner Group trying to enter it, which also means that the roads leading into Bakhmut are under threat of being physically taken over. At this point, they're basically all under fire control, which means that there's no supplies coming in from the north. Really, the only place where I think supplies could come in from the north would be this minor road over here. You see this one from Orikivo-Vasilivka, goes through Berkivka, and then goes into the Stupki district. I think this is the only other road besides the Kromove road that could work at the moment. The crossroads over here, where Ukrainians filmed themselves earlier today, cannot actually be used for supplies at the moment. It's way too close to the front line. But it is still physically under control based on what we're seeing, and that there are some Ukrainian troops being moved along the road based on that footage. Now, in Krasnohora, the Russians were able to take over a building materials factory. There's footage to back this up. This gives the Wagner Group some positions, some pretty fortified higher positions just to the southern part of Krasnohora, which will give them the opportunity to fire upon the rest of the Ukrainian positions in the town that have really been holding out for a while. But now that they're basically enveloped on all sides, with basically fortified areas being taken on every single direction, it does make it very difficult for the Ukrainians to hold on. They may have to eventually retreat to the town of Parasokivka, and so from there that could lead to a difficult situation for the rest of Ukraine, and a bit of a flanking maneuver around the northwestern part of Bakhmut. This area that I'm circling right now is located on a bit of a high ground, like 200 meters above sea level, and so taking it over by Russia, like in a pincer maneuver, would give them the advantage and allow them to fire upon the Kromove road. It would also cut off the road that I was previously talking about that goes through Berkivka, and so that might be a way to catch the Ukrainians off guard while the fighting is going on around Ivanivske. Now let's move on to the situation in Blagodatne. The Russians are advancing from the north and the south to surround these fortifications over here, this Ukrainian defensive line. To the north, the Ukrainians were able the Russians were able to use their positions in Sakhoy, Ivanseti, to attack the town of Vasyukivka, where fighting is ongoing, and we'll see if the Russians could advance along this new line of towns that are rural in nature and are lower in elevation. To the north, there are rumors that Russia took over all of Belohorovka. There's no proof of this though, so I can't confirm this. What I can confirm is the Ukrainians were able to retreat, and they were forced to retreat due to the fact that their forward positions were exposed, and they wanted to shorten the front line, and they were being actively attacked by the Russians. So they abandoned their positions in the water filtration facility and some of these other more exposed positions that were on lower elevation anyway, and retreated to the main road of Bilohorivka, and we still control this white mountain over here. So the Russians will have to dislodge Ukraine from those positions, and then if they want to make any sort of advance on Siversk, they need to dislodge the Ukrainians from their positions on these hills that are on a relatively high elevation, that are just to the south of Klischiivka and Serebrenka. So that is necessary if Russia wants to conduct an operation in Siversk. They failed to do this last time that they tried attacking Siversk in the summer. Okay, so in the Kreminna direction, the Russians are actively on the offensive now. They are on a more of attacking posture. They were able to clear out many of the Ukrainian reconnaissance groupings in the forested areas, and they were able to advance through these open fields into the town of Torske. They're not in it yet, but they are pretty close to it, which means that the fighting is pretty close to the Zherebez River. Also means that the fighting is approaching the town of Yampil. If the Russians are able to advance through the forest, they could attack Yampil. And then, again, this would flank the Ukrainian positions just to the south of the Donets River, around all of these minor towns that are protecting the northern flank of Siversk. So that's probably a part of why Russia is attacking this area. It's also, again, to fix Ukrainian troops in these positions to keep them stretched out thin. Around Chervono-Popivka, the Russians were able to push the Ukrainians out of their fortified positions in the forest belts just to the west of the town. So now there's a lot of pressure taken off the main supply line into Kreminna. And then if we go all the way up to the Oskil River in the front around Kupiansk, the Russians have also tried to conduct some attacking operations. They fought battles in the direction of Klischiivka, although there's no confirmed changes to the front line around there, engaging the 103rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade. There was fighting in the direction of Mastyutivka, which is, I don't even know if it's a town even. I don't see any houses over there. It's just some collection of roads that are located around forested area. So you do have fights in the forest. You also have fights around Klischiivka. The Russians have full control over Dvorichny, took over the rail line, the school, and now they're advancing through that road to attack the town of Klischiivka, which is now contested at the moment. You have the 109th Territorial Defense Brigade defending over here, and you also have National Guard unit, and you have the 14th Brigade also actively defending, also 92nd Brigade, if I recall correctly. So the point of the Russians in attacking these positions is to push the Ukrainians out of their bridgehead on the Oskil River, which is being used to, first of all, keep the Russians preoccupied while there's fighting going on other fronts, but also as a potential springboard to launch attacks deeper into the Kharkiv region and then going into the Luhansk region near the Russian border. And so that's why the Russians have held out in this area. Because there's such rugged terrain, and these sort of offensive operations over here are very difficult for Ukraine or for Russia even at this point. So a lot of the fighting is just positional in nature, and a lot of it is more so just artillery duels. So that's all for the front line today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.